Morning, Carrie. Yeah, I said a prayer too as it was rebooting up. Can you hear me okay? Please, Lord. And I just do not understand this. Signal's right there. I'm 10 feet from it. We'll delete both videos and we'll try it tomorrow. Mm. Okay. All right. Oh, interesting. Can you hear me now? Is everything well? All right, let's give this a shot, and I will try not to move as much as I normally do. All right. If I start to freeze, just type in freezing. Just type in F real quick. All right. So we are in the Old Testament book of First Samuel, chapter 26. All right. We'll do one more chapter tomorrow, and then we will. Let me try it, Carrie. And we will finish up next Thursday if we can make it through today. All right. Now, verse 1, the Ziphites went to Saul. So yesterday, Saul and David had another engagement with someone else and ends up with a wife out of it. And this is going to take a little bit of time. And so some time has passed. Saul has been kind of calm, but now we find that this is about to change. So we again are in the Old Testament, first book of Samuel, chapter 26. Verse 1, the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon?" And so we see the world stirring against David. No reason for these people to do this other than to curry the favor of Saul. Now so they go up to Saul and say, "Hey, what about this?" Now, what this really does is says a lot about Saul and how he lets the world influence him. He's broken several oaths to David to protect David and to have peace. All right. So what does he do? Verse 2. So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops to search there for David. And Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah facing Jeshimon. But David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed them there, he sent scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. So what we see here for the moment is David's like, whoa, what's going on? And, people are telling him Saul's brought an army down, the same army that chased him last time. And so David's like, well, let's go send some scouts. And the scouts come back and said, yep, that's Saul. And yep, that's his army. So David has to figure this out. So he's probably besides himself right now in confusion. What is going on? Why does this guy keep breaking his oath? Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. Now, a couple things. David, he needs to see this himself. David needs to address this. This is about David and Saul. He doesn't send any intermediary. He needs to see. Now, the other thing that's fascinating here is there's a glitch here in the King James version of this. It's not in the New King James, but it's in the King James. So where we see that Saul slept in the middle of this army, the Hebrew word was misinterpreted by the King James, and it says he lay in a trench. And so I just wanted to call, I always like to call out these little details. Doesn't change the story at all. Doesn't mean there's an error. Just means that somewhere a man did not interpret the circumstances correctly for the word that was being translated. But it's important to understand, because I like to call out whenever I can the discrepancies in the NIV. And I always bounce against the King James because that's a popular Bible. But again, this isn't found in the New King James, only the King James. Just something to consider. All right. And so amidst this, so David's looking down at the camp, 3,000 men, big camp. It's just him. And so he sees Saul in the middle. He sees the army of the guard with him, the commander, and they're in the middle, as they should be, well protected. One would think that's why they're laying like that. So David then asks Amalek, the Hittite, and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? All right. There's not much said about these, but it's assumed that they're the scouts that he sent. They came back and he said, okay, show me. And so he went back with the scouts. So he asked these two men, who's going to go with me down into the camp? Talk about bravery. And Abishai says, I'll go with you. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep soundly inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and his soldiers were lying around him. So all these men are sneezing, farting, doing all the things that men do when they sleep, especially when they're in the field and they're eating field rations. And they're slaying Saul, and he's got his spear. The spear he's tried to kill numerous people with, and almost all his entire family at some point, is stuck in the ground at his head. Okay. So it's a heck of a scene when you think about it. Fires are burning, and so Abishai says to David, today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Where am I at? Into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice. So Abishai is suggesting to David, look, God has delivered. We're here. We can end all of this right now. You can be king. We'll use his own spear on him. Remember, David cut off Goliath's head with his own sword. And this spear is not just a symbol of Saul's power, but it's something he uses, unfortunately, to sin with constantly as he tries to murder the people that love him and he should love. Talk about karma if you believed in it, but this is God at work. And so, but David says to Abishai, now remember, David had this opportunity in the cave just this week, a couple days earlier, and the men kind of talked him into it. It's a sign from God. He's been delivered, but David didn't do it. But David said to Abishai, verse 9, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and the water jug that are near his head and let's go. All right. So imagine this discussion occurring amidst 3,000 of your enemy, and there's only 2 of you. Any one of them could wake up at any minute. Presumably, he had perimeter guards, and they just skittered through a hole amidst their perimeter, and one of them might return. Somebody might have to get up and go to the bathroom. But that's how much on the edge they are, especially if Saul is there to kill him. Be no problem at that point. So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Even in this, the Lord's supernatural power is at work. He kept that army asleep. All 3,000 men slept. No one heard David and Abishai come into the camp, have a discussion, take the king's spear and water jug right from his head. Now, this is thrust in the ground. This is desert. So whenever you thrust into hard earth and you pull it, dirt flies everywhere, pulls pieces up with it, but nothing wakes them up. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on top of the hill some distance away. There was a wide space between them, between David, Abishai on the hill, and Saul and his army in the camp. And he called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, Aren't you going to answer me, Abner? So imagine, he finally gets out of the camp. It's the wee hours of the morning. And so he's up high. So the sound's going to carry, and he yells, aren't you going to answer me, Abner? And so Abner replies. So there's a ripple across the camp. David hears, who are you who calls to the king? And David said, you're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your Lord the king? Someone came to destroy your Lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head? And so David's yelling this to Abner. He's the commander. He's the commander of the royal guard. His job is to protect the king. He's probably leading the army under Saul's guidance, obviously. Saul's the ultimate commander. And so he sets the case up. You have failed your king. Someone came in and took his spear. But Saul hears this, obviously, and recognized David's voice and said, is that your voice, David, my son? Once again, the calmness of David and his actions, the purity of his heart, his character, begins to soothe and transition Saul. Now remember, when David first came into Saul's service 20 chapters ago, it was to sing to him and to play the lyre to soothe him when the Spirit came upon him and made him crazy. All right. Once again, David's sheer character soothes Saul and settles him. It's no longer about what the Ziphites said. He now hears David's voice, and he calls him David, my son, not the son of Jesse, nothing like he's done in the past. There's an intimacy here all of a sudden. And David replied, it is my Lord, the king. And he added, why is my Lord pursuing his servant? What have I done and what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my Lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, other people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. So once again, David gives Saul an out. Hey, if it's me, then may the Lord accept an offering so that we can come back to peace. But if it's other people, the Ziphites, then may the Lord curse them. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance and have said, go serve other gods. This is a tremendous line. This is a break in Saul's confidence for a second. What he's saying is, this has been so bad for me. You have broken your oath so many times. You've listened to so many other people other than going to the source, other than just talking to me, that I'm considering leaving Israel and our living God. This is where David's at. And we're going to see this again next week and how this has huge ramifications. All right. And it shows where he's at this place and time in his mind, his mental health, candidly where he's at. Again, remember yesterday, he's done everything right for Nahab, and yet Nahab still did evil upon him. Same thing's happening with Saul. But he's letting Saul know the depth and the tiredness of this, and he's had enough. And now, do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea as one hunts a partridge in the mountains. All right, so there's an Arab culture where when they're hunting partridges, they basically create a line and they just keep moving the partridges so that when they fly up, they keep flying up to the point where they get exhausted and they can't fly up anymore, and then they just club them. This is what he's referencing. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I've acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. Now he's responding to David and the other gods comment, because remember, Saul has finally admitted that David will be the next king of Israel. How will God deal with Saul if Saul's actions have chased the next king of Israel to leave Israel and the living God? This is what he's dealing with in his mind. Now, of course, that's not going to happen, because if God has said David's going to be the next king, guess what? David's going to be the next king. But this is the position that Saul finds himself, as he has made himself the center of his world. God is only something that's punitive on the edges, and he can avoid him as best he can. And he thinks his actions will now avoid God again. So I'm a sinner. I'm sorry, David. Now, David responds. Oh, he goes on to say, I will try not to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. Now, he says this publicly. He's shouting to this mountain where David's hidden in the night. That are shouting back. So all his men hear this. The same men that have been pursuing David on his behalf for some time now, multiple instances. And so Saul is coming to the end of his kingship, because a king who constantly does the wrong things publicly isn't going to survive for very long. All right. So the warning signs are beginning to ramp up. All right. But David's a man who soothes Saul. And it's always been the way sin works. Sin looks like it's nice at a time that we do it, but it always has ramifications. Saul is like sin for David. David confronts him again and again and again, but until sin is dealt with finally, sin will always come back. And Saul chases sin. He listens to gossip. These are all things that impact churches to this day, and organizations. I mean, my degree is in organizational management. And, it's something we talk about often. The human emotions, gossip. But this is what drives Saul. It's his image, it's his reputation, it's who he is. But again, David is vastly different. David could have ended this, but it wasn't God's timing. And David is tuned to God and his timing. Now, David responds, "Here is the king's spear. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble." Contrast David's character and Saul's character. Isn't it much, much, much different? Saul's moving with gossip. David sent spies or scouts just to find out, yep, that is Saul. Crap. Let's go see what this guy wants now. And so David himself goes, "Hey, scouts, take me back down there." Okay. Hey, we need to go in and see what he's up to. Who's going to go with me? And so they do. And there he is, sleeping, delivered by the Lord, supernatural sleep. And David's like, nope, although delivered to me, this is another growth moment. God is not done with him. God will tell me when he's done with Saul. God's hand will deal with this, not mine. This is not a moment for Saul. This is a moment for David, and to test his understanding of God and his faith in God. Amen. And so we end with, then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. All right. So once again, Saul blows in the wind, and David goes back to where God sent him, into the wilderness, to do what he needs to do to be seasoned and to grow in the Lord, to build the people's trust, to be the king they need, not the king they want. Saul. There's such a stark contrast here. And so I just want to this ends the chapter. This is another example of an oath being broken over gossip. It shows the illegitimacy of the way these people take their words seriously and give oaths and so on and so forth. This is the king of Israel. He's held to a higher standard amongst his people, as he should be. And yet he flows willy-nilly in the wind. David, meanwhile, is a rock. Although it's so tempting to end Saul, it's not his position, it's God's to do. And we'll see that next week. Amen. All right, my friends, it sounds like we got through this. Thankful Thursday. So I'm thankful we got through this and without any technical difficulties or delays. As always, I love you guys. And I pray that the peace of the Lord, the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that gives us the strength to wait on the Lord, to obey the Lord, to give to his timing and not our own, to live by his tempo and not a worldly tempo. May that peace rest upon you and your families today. And until we meet again tomorrow morning, may the Lord bless you and your families with safety and good health. Amen, amen, and amen. All right, my friends, I love you guys. Let me do a roll call real quick. So I'm going to work backwards. Morning, Manny, Audrey, Carrie, and Stella didn't catch up with us, I guess. All right. I know she'll see it though. Okay, my friends, I love you guys. Have a great day. Enjoy the weather. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. Take care.